Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling the single highest stakes decision you're going to face as a technical leader right now, balancing AI performance against the sheer gravity of infrastructure costs. We hear a turn about the magic of artificial intelligence, but behind the scenes, there's a fierce economic battle happening. We're going to break down the real-world financial trade-offs between utilizing AI APIs versus building out your own local deployments.
Here is our roadmap. We'll start with the AI deployment dilemma, walk through the model lifecycle, examine a massive 32 by cost divider, weigh scaling against vendor lock-in, check out the compliance firewall, and wrap up with a final blueprint for CTOs. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The AI deployment dilemma, choosing your path. We are moving way past those basic prompt and response bots. We're entering the era of the deeply integrated digital employee. Think about it. We're shifting from generative AI that just answers a question to agentic AI. These are autonomous systems that can actually plan tasks, make decisions, use tools, and execute workflows completely on their own. The global agentic AI market is actually expected to push well above a $100 billion valuation. This isn't just some new software feature, it is a totally new paradigm. And because these digital workers need immense compute power to operate, how you choose to host them is your very first and honestly your most expensive hurdle. Moving to Section 2, Baseline to Production, the model lifecycle. You literally cannot grasp the financial trade-offs here without knowing how these massive models are actually born. They don't just magically appear ready to handle your workflows. It's a rigorous, multi-phase grind. First, you have baseline pre-training, which is just feeding the model an ocean of unstructured data so it learns basic patterns. Then comes Step 2, adaptation and RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback. This right here is a huge, incredibly expensive bottleneck. You have humans actively labeling multiple choice data to teach the algorithm right from wrong. Finally, Step 3 is production fine-tuning, which is absolutely crucial. This aligns the model to specific tasks so it doesn't just confidently hallucinate when it goes live in your system. Executing every single one of these steps eats up astronomical amounts of energy, data, and hardware. Which brings us to Section 3, the 32x cost divider, cloud versus metal. Because all of that training requires massive computing power, deploying these fine-tuned models introduces a truly staggering financial reality. When you're deciding how to deploy, you essentially have two choices: hook into a cloud API or run it locally on your own servers, often called bare metal. And yeah, you heard that right, 32. Choosing to host a local large language model on your bare metal servers can literally be 32 times more expensive than just piping into a cloud API. That is a 32x multiplier on your budget. If you're spending $1 for API access, you are spending $32 to do that exact same workload internally. Why? Because you are footing the bill for the physical hardware, skyrocketing electricity usage, and the heavy-duty cooling systems required to keep it all from literally melting down. The financial divide here is wild. Cloud APIs might charge a tiny 30 cents for 1 million input tokens and $2.50 for a million output tokens. Paying by the token on a pay-as-you-go basis is incredibly cheap, but local deployments, they demand an agonizing, never-ending budget for ultra-expensive GPUs. And you aren't just buying those chips once. You are paying for continuous infrastructure maintenance and massive utility bills to keep those servers running day and night. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. If I use an API, won't they steal my proprietary data? So many startups assume cloud APIs will just use their data to train future models. But that brings us to strict service-level model agreements, or SLMs. These actually provide a legal digital certificate guaranteeing your data remains 100% yours. Don't confuse this with small language models. In enterprise vendor contracts, an SLM agreement is your legal shield. Billion-dollar organizations use APIs comfortably because of these exact legal guarantees, while a lot of smaller startups stay unnecessarily terrified of losing their data as providers. Section 4. Scaling versus vendor lock-in, the operational trade-off. So, if the cloud is so cheap and protected by SLM agreements, why would any CTO ever hesitate to use an API? Well, in enterprise architecture, cost is never the whole story. It's a relentless tug-of-war between convenience and control. Sure, cloud APIs give you rapid scaling and zero hardware maintenance, but relying on an API means your entire application could literally break overnight if the vendor alters their software development kit, their SDK. That SDK is the bridge your code uses to communicate with the model. If a third-party vendor changes that bridge, your code has to change instantly or your operations completely halt. Local models, on the other hand, They give you absolute control and total immunity to those sudden third-party changes.
It really paints a picture of intense operational risk. The cheap agility of an API means you are permanently tethered to some third-party vendor's roadmap. Plus, shared APIs have strict context windows. A limited context window means the AI might literally forget the beginning of a massive enterprise document by the time it's reading the end of it. To bypass those restrictions and process unlimited data natively, you have to embrace the burden of local models. But as we know, that means massive, continuous hardware investments and hiring dedicated, highly paid maintenance teams just to keep the internal systems online.
Moving to Section 5, the compliance firewall, data privacy security.
We've talked about cost and operational risk, but for certain industries, this debate isn't even about flexibility or cost. It is strictly about regulatory survival. Take heavily regulated entities like banks. They inherently distrust third-party vendors. They flat out refuse to route sensitive financial or personal data through external cloud models. As our sources bluntly put it, banks did not want to trust anyone, not US-based companies, not international models. The regulatory risk of a data leak or a compliance violation is just far too catastrophic to outsource. For banking, finance, and healthcare, complete internal data control on their own local servers is basically the only acceptable architectural path. That 32x cost multiplier we talked about, it isn't seen as a burden. It is actively budgeted as a mandatory insurance policy to build an absolute impenetrable compliance firewall. Finally, Section 6, the CTO's final blueprint, the decision matrix. All right, let's synthesize all of this. Consider this your ultimate cheat sheet as a tech leader. If you are running a nimble startup, you ride the API wave to save your budget. You just have to accept the vendor lock-in risk because that pay-as-you-go cost is essential for your survival and rapid scaling. If you're in general market research, you use APIs but keep a very close eye on context window and token limit exhaustion. But if you are mapping an enterprise architecture for medical records or high finance, you must bite the bullet. You buy the hardware, you accept the high cost of it becoming obsolete, and you secure your perimeter with a local, self-hosted large language model. As you outline your future AI roadmap, you've got to ask yourself a really hard question. Is avoiding vendor lock-in genuinely worth a 32x premium on your infrastructure budget? Or is a tightly negotiated service-level model agreement with a cloud provider actually enough to keep your digital workers safely employed? The future of your company's operational budget depends entirely on how you answer that. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.